You're listening to iCannabisRadio.com.
We will listen to another edition of the Hemp Connoisseur Radio. Welcome. We're back from, I took last week off because I was at the Hemp Symposium, actually with my friend here, Bill. So we have Bill Althouse here. Say hello, Bill.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Thank you for being here. Just to give a little background on Bill. Waiting for your bio to load. Bill has been involved. First, you were the first solar electric installer in the world.
Yeah, my first cells came from the space program, seconds from Bell Labs. There wasn't a manufacturer yet.
I'm glad you mentioned it, because I was going to ask, how can you claim you're the first? Well, if you're part of the space program, that explains it.
It was factory seconds. I wasn't part of that. I got them from the space program.
Wow.
Everybody thought I was crazy back then.
Well, I'm sure they still think you're a little crazy now.
I try to be.
Yeah. So you've been working 30 years as an alternative energy engineer. You've also worked 6 years in the film industry as a lighting technician, 6 years as a Stone Age warrior. I love that term. 40-year cannabis grower, 3 years medical cannabis grower. And now you're in cannabis biotechnology, which includes cannabis micropropagation.
Correct.
And then you're also involved in the genetics and industrial hemp for energy. And obviously, such a perfect guest to have on the Hemp Connoisseur Radio. You really are. And I met you at the last hands-on hemp event that you were speaking at at Hoodlam about hemp biodiesel. And we got a lot of topics to cover today after looking at this quick little bio about you. And it's totally my wheelhouse of interest. When it comes to alternative energy. So I guess we could start from the beginning. And I do want to say we're going to also talk about your campaign to regulate alcohol like marijuana, which I think is brilliant and I love. So We're definitely going to get into that. But let's talk a little bit about your background first. So how did you get involved to be the first solar electric installer?
I've always been a readaholic. And I saw a reference to, using photons to make electrons move, and I thought it was fascinating. And the national government's research at that time was at Sandia National Laboratories in Albuquerque, and I didn't live that far away. So I just ran over and started hanging out, seeing what the guys were up to. And I had first read, at that time, every paper written in the world, which was a very short stack. That's a big stack now. Right. So I walked into the lab at Sandia, and I started asking a bunch of questions, and they thought I was this guy that came in from Jet Propulsion Laboratories. And it was like a full day before they realized I had just walked off the street.
You were just walking off the street.
Right.
Well, you present yourself well, so they just thought, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about. Huh?
I had the questions.
Yeah, you had the questions. So, and then what was the next step for you there?
I started fooling around with some cells, and then Arco Solar became the first manufacturer in the world. And there was a company founded in Santa Fe that was national, the biggest solar supplier in the country, mostly solar thermal in the tax credit heyday. And the head of engineering, who used to be the head of engineering for Boeing, had never seen a photovoltaic cell. And I just walked in off the street one day and went in and said, hey, are you going to get the distributorship for Arco? They're coming online next year. And he went, yeah. What do you know about it? And I said, well, I built the first panel in the world off a satellite. And so they gave me the job. I was the head of engineering for the first distributor of solar panels in the world.
Wow. Do you have solar energy at your house right now?
I'm homeless right now, kind of. I just moved to Colorado, so I'm looking. Photovoltaics, though, has never really met. There's still an embodied energy issue. When I started in photovoltaics, it took 50 times as much energy to make it than it would ever produce. And still, the energy balance doesn't look that great for photovoltaics. Plus, I'm a localization guy. So for me, there's no difference between importing Chinese solar panels and importing Saudi Arabian oil. To me, it's the same.
No, I get it. Well, except for maybe the carbon footprint of it. I mean, there's still a huge carbon footprint from importing it, though.
And there is, and the carbon footprint on photovoltaics is pretty high. It takes a lot of energy to make that system, the wires, the circuits, the solder, the glass, the plastic backer, the aluminum frame. So when it adds up, it's quite a bit of energy.
Well, and I also have learned quite a bit. I've done a bit of research on solar energy, and there was a common misconception that I know I had, and I'm pretty sure a lot of our listeners have had about solar energy, and that's like, oh, I just want to get off the grid. And my understanding now, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is just because you have solar panels in your house doesn't mean you're off the grid, because you would need a place to store that energy. And what you're doing is just sending the energy to the power company, and they're just sending you back energy to utilize for your home.
Right, that's more cost effective. The batteries alone, over their life cycle, cost you about 25 cents a kilowatt hour, or twice as much as it would have cost to just buy it from the grid.
Wow.
So batteries and standalone applications. When I first started in photovoltaics, I saw that as a problem, and rather than trying to worry about energy payback or what the cost was, I kind of went out into the Pacific and put emergency medical radios on remote islands. And there you didn't have to worry about the payback. If they used that radio one time when there was an epidemic or a drought, it saved a life. Now that's payback.
Yeah. Right.
So I went out and did that for a bunch of years so I didn't have to deal with that energy value chain issue of photovoltaics.
Wow. That's crazy. So moving on a little bit from the solar side, I mean, and I know we could probably talk an entire show on the solar side, but we are the hemp connoisseur. We got to get into that part.
Well, hemp comes right back into the energy equation in some interesting ways. Yeah. The most profitable small-scale renewable energy company in the world today is a small farmer in Germany with 100 acres of hemp. Now, over there, the natural gas costs are really, really high. Yeah. And he became what's called a heating entrepreneur. And so he sells BTUs. That's his business.
Okay.
But it's a small-scale, vertically integrated value added on hemp agriculture. What he does is he plants his 100 acres in hemp, and at the end of the year, he just bales it and leaves it sitting in the field. Once it gets cold and winter comes, he's got a flatbed with a forklift. He'll go out and grab 1-ton bales, throw them on the flatbed, look on the laptop in the front of his little Mercedes truck, and see what the temperatures are in the buildings he sells BTUs to. Now he's got a giant boiler that takes that 1-ton bale haul. So he owns the boilers, he owns the delivery system, he owns the meters that do the billing for BTUs, and he'll just go to the building, get down his forklift, put the 1-ton bale into the boiler, and then he sells BTUs to the commercial business. And some of these are really big, and there's heating pipes that go to multiple buildings from a single boiler. But his model, he's grossing $5,000 an acre per year. So his annual gross is $500,000 on a 100-acre farm. Spectacular.
Wow. So I'm sorry, I want to back up a little bit on the BTUs. I always hear BTUs when it's referring to, heating and cooling, but what does exactly stand for?
It's a British thermal unit. It's the amount of energy that it takes to raise 1 pound of water 1 degree Fahrenheit.
Gotcha. So now when he's turning the hemp tons, I mean, this is, like you said, it's been sitting there for a while. It's gotten cold, and it's pretty much dead already.
It's dry.
Now, how just by boiling it is creating BTUs?
He's burning it, and it's a high-tech secondary combustion reactor, so the emissions are incredibly low, and the overall system's efficiency, 91%. Of the energy available in the hemp is delivered to the customers as heat.
That's impressive, 91%.
It's very, 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 very efficient. And it comes out to about 14 million BTUs per ton of hemp fiber.
Wow. So now how many, is it homes or businesses that he's using these?
These are big commercials. He does the city hall, the school, a couple apartment complexes.
And all of this from 100 acres?
Correct.
So I can't even, I'm not even going to try to do the math in my head right now, but if we're trying to do something like that for, say, just our government buildings in Denver, are we looking at about the same acreage? Are we looking at even more to help
Well,
it?
Denver already has a delivery system. There's a lot of district energy in downtown Denver. So it was actually the first district energy system. Like electric companies use wires to deliver energy to homes. Sure. Well, here in Denver, you've got the first district heating system in the United States that delivers heat to customers through an insulated pipe network. They also deliver chilled water and air conditioning at the same time.
Really? Through all of Denver, or just for the
downtown core, just high density. It's the profitability is a function of BTUs per meter of pipe per year.
Now, is this something that could be implemented, though? Or is it already a system that's in place that wouldn't be able to implement the hemp as another renewable resource?
Our real problem right here is the price of natural gas. It is so cheap per million BTUs. It pretty much destroyed. Like, we had a proposal to do all of downtown Santa Fe's core. We had gotten a multi-million-dollar grant from USDA to do the engineering, brought in the chair of the Biomass Committee of the EU to be head project engineer. He had done 400 cities in Europe, complete conversion to biomass. We were ready to build at $13 a million BTUs, and we were there. We were starting to really, talking about letting contracts and digging trenches and laying pipe. And then fracking came along. And, you know, if it wasn't legal to destroy the environment of future generations, natural gas would have gone through, by our estimates, $20 a million BTUs. It's at $2 a million. And really the difference is sacrificing our total environment and the water, drinking water for future generations. That's why it's so cheap. If you had to calculate the damages into it, it would be a ridiculous price. But, you know, they public the damages and private the profits.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. We are, you know, we're in this capitalist society where we look at the cost when it's in a monetary value, but we're not looking at, you know, the environmental cost of doing something like that and adding that into the factor. I mean, and again, monetary value to clean up the mess that fracking is creating, and some things that we don't even know that it's creating.
Well, the real cost.
It's the real cost.
The real
exactly.
cost. And, you know, and it's not capitalism anymore. It's, you know, predatorism.
That's a good way to put it.
It's kind of it's a predator nation, and we're all running for our lives.
Yeah, that's a really good point to put it in. Yeah. Now, obviously, you started with solar. Now, was it just being involved in the solar side and the photovoltaic technology, and then starting to research other alternative forms of fuel that kind of leaned you towards the hemp and taking a look at it?
Well, ways to decentralize economy have always been the thing. So basically, I look at a community and what is the capital extracting technology? Well, most communities, it's energy, food, banking. You know, there's some real basics, insurance, healthcare. There's some real basic ways that all the value in a local community is extracted, leaving us poor. And, you know, instead of making money, we cannot lose money. Like, say, like you got an acequia that if you can dam it up and put the water to your field, it's productive. If it goes downstream, i.e. to Wall Street, it leaves you quite poor.
Sure.
And looking for ways to stop that cash exodus has led me to energy, food things, other systems, trying to localize the economy to make the economic benefits boomerang back instead of leave.
And that's kind of where hemp does come in. I mean, it is a way to localize the economy here in Colorado.
Absolutely. It's got some incredible potential. The thing that's so exciting about hemp is if you want to reverse that cash flow, you have to make products. You know, as long as we make nothing and we must buy and bring in everything, that's a one-way street of economic death. If we have raw materials that can make things, maybe then we have a chance. Well, right now we don't have raw materials, and that's where hemp comes in. Is it gives us the opportunity to have raw materials, industrial feedstocks, all kinds of things that make it possible to make a product.
Sure. Well, and it's just it's interesting because you're right. I commonly hear this, and I say this too. It's like, you know, we don't produce anything in America anymore. We consume. That's all we do is consume, you know, and of course other companies and other countries always want to break into the American market because they know they're going to sell a lot here because we consume more than anybody else in the world, pretty much all of the other countries combined, I mean, and then some, I believe. But yeah, we're not producing anything anymore. We've become this consumer service-oriented society.
Not sustainable.
And it's not sustainable.
Any economist, Econ 101, if you want to look at the health of a company, a country, a city, a county, it's always imports versus exports. I mean, do you bring in more than you pay out? If you're running a business and your overhead's $1,000 a month and you only bring in $500 a month,
you're gonna last.
You know, but yet as consumers, they tell us that can go on forever. And it really can't. We need to really stop buying and start producing.
Hey, just out of curiosity, I'm sure you have a theory on that. Why do you think that they're propagating that kind of a a consensus among consumers is that, it's going to go on forever. I mean, it eventually this is going to come back and bite all the businesses in the ass as well.
Well, when capitalism fades to predatorism, taking what you have in your pocket isn't enough for these guys. They want to have what's in your pocket next year, and they want to have what's going to be in your pocket the year after that. And that's why when you see a car quoted, it's not the price, it's how much per month. And they're trying to steal from the future, and I think that's really the danger in our whole economy, is they figured out quite effectively how to steal everything that's going to be created in the future and steal it now.
And it's really just a system of control.
Exactly. I mean, slavery doesn't need chains. I mean, if you can get people to agree to pay everything they're going to make for the rest of their lives, you don't need chains.
Well, see, I love this conversation. We're going to have to go to break, and I'd like to definitely touch on this whole the idea of the chainless slavery. So thanks for joining us. Listen to the Hemp Connoisseur Radio. We'll be back in just a moment. River Rock Wellness, located at 4935 York Street and on the corner of 6th and Calumet, right next to Lamar's Donuts at 990 West 6th Avenue, offers in-house, award-winning organic medical cannabis flowers, concentrates, tinctures, topicals, edibles, and raw superfoods for all patients. Prices range from $160 to $240 an ounce, with member and non-member benefits including caregiver, SSI, SSDI, vets, travelers, and sponsored programs. With brands you trust like Healthy Creations, Rare Dankness, Rock Butter, Priva, Token Daily, and more. Become a River Rock patient or renew with us today and receive a $100 ounce of choice. Offer good through April 20th, 2013.
The chocolatiers at Incredibles are dedicated to crafting the finest chocolate from high-quality ingredients to ensure the greatest possible medicated edibles in the world. Consistency and quality are top priority. Lab testing on each and every batch. Rick and Josh have been making non-medicated chocolates for years for such retail outlets as Whole Foods and Vitamin Cottage. Today, we are focused on crafting our award-winning medicated incredible chocolate bars. We are professional bakers, and we believe food should be made from scratch. We guarantee your satisfaction. Have an incredible day.
I'm Gary Johnson, and you're listening to iCannabis Radio, and I want to say, talk it up, Colorado.
What's that?
I know him.
You know Gary Johnson? Yeah, he's a great guy, man. He's an interesting cat. We just left the break talking about that a system of slavery control doesn't need chains. In fact, that's a very ineffectual system. And we're talking about this economy and the fact that and this all does have to do with hemp, for those of you who think that we're really veering off there, but it's all interconnected. So I just want to make that point. But
it creates an alternative. If we're talking about an alternative economy, we have to have some kind of mechanism to make that happen, and raw materials is that.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, I always say that the hemp is the people's plant. It's something that a farmer should be able to grow, and we should be able to utilize for whatever we want to use. Whereas energy sources like oil and natural gas are really systems of control, because not anybody can go ahead and plant a plant that creates oil. You have to drill for it, and it's a very arduous, expensive process. That
centralized versus decentralized.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's something that you could say we're having a big old. I'm sure some people will be like, "Oh, they're being socialist." No. But we're talking about.
Socialism is not a bad term.
No, and I agree, it's not a bad term. People bastardize terms just to try to twist it for everybody's,
Try to avoid the logical, intelligent conversation.
Exactly. So they just want to have button issues.
Boogeyman.
Exactly. Yeah, socialism is a boogeyman to some people. Yeah. You're right. But you're right. I mean, now we're talking about having an energy source that can be growing from the ground, that farmers are making money off, that the people are making money on refining, and then we're utilizing it for all these different things. And that takes away that system of control.
Right. The less you need them, the less control they have. Yeah,
there's a great book out that I read a long time ago that impacted me pretty well. It was a book by Daniel Quinn called Ishmael.
Oh, yeah.
You heard it? And it's an interesting concept. I mean, it's a fiction, but it's an allegory, and the whole point of it is that the book is trying to show you the bars of your captivity in society, without giving too much. I definitely recommend people go read it. The Ishmael by Daniel Quinn, and I'm not going to give anything too much more away of it. But the whole book was really about saying, look, a lion that's born in captivity in a zoo could be pacing across in a cage and not knowing why something's wrong, but it does have a sense that something's wrong. And I think that's where our society is at. Is there's a sense that something's not quite right and not moving in the proper way, but we don't recognize the bars of our own captivity sometimes.
Well, it's kind of interesting you bring up the animal. Humans like to think we're not part of the animal kingdom. We are.
Oh, yeah.
And there's things that we knew before we were born.
Mm-hmm.
And those things have to be overwritten because that software doesn't support concentrated predator-type capitalism.
Right.
Matriarchal is really the structure under which we evolved. And evolution is a really slow process.
Very slow process.
So, it's only been patriarchal for 2,000-3,000 years, so there's no way we have evolved into the new system. We've been trained into it. One of the things about living in the Stone Age for 7 years is I always try to say I learned something, and the opposite's actually true. I was able to unlearn all the crap we've been force-fed to enslave us.
Now, you're going to have to explain that, by the way. You know that, right? So you said you lived in the Stone Age for how many years?
7 years.
Now, what do you mean by that?
No stores, no radio, TV, electricity, running water. I mean, Stone Age.
Where were you living?
All across Micronesia. I got out there doing these emergency solar radios on remote islands, and ended up probably the most interesting. The Coast Guard ship that dropped me to build the radio got into a gun battle with a Japanese longliner and shot the captain. Wow. So they had to take him back to an island there was a hospital on, so they couldn't come back for me. And I got left 6 months on, like it was the time before steel.
Wow.
I mean, this goes way, way, way
Now,
back.
were you living with locals at the time?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was in the village.
What was that culture like?
Well, true matriarchal, and that's kind of what I was coming to. When you try to live in that system as an American, we have all this stuff going on in our heads that prevents us from being able to live the way evolution created us to live. Because it's distracting. There's all this stuff. First of all, what dudes have to think is irrelevant. There's a women's circle, and they decide what is and what isn't. There's no logic to be applied to that. The decision comes out of the women's circle, and you go, okay, and that's it. And it's really amazing, like how a bird flies, a little wind fluffle, or a wind shear, and it adapts. It's kind of like that every day. You go out on the reef, incredibly dangerous, by the way. But you go out on the reef every day, and you spearfish, and you come back, and you hand baskets of fish to every house. And you do that every day, like forever. And you don't need to think. There's no questions. I sailed with navigators who can go anywhere across the Pacific without needing a compass. And if you wanted to learn that, the first rule would be is you never get a question. You have to learn by assimilation. So it was really kind of really instructive when I came back to civilization, because I had assimilated. I had totally gone over to the other side and was functioning in the matriarchal culture, the way we were designed to live by evolution. And you didn't need to know anything, but just to...
I bet it was a pretty stress-free life.
It was just amazing. And all the crap we got to deal with here between men and women, socially, there was none of that. Non-existent.
Well, I'm assuming way more leisure time as well.
Well, no, you worked from sunrise to sunset every day.
Okay.
Well, there's no stores.
Well, that's true.
No money, none of that kind of system. So feeding the village is nonstop every waking moment, every day. But it doesn't feel like work, It's so connected to what's going on. And I've tried to find that feeling ever since I came back, and part of it was I did a program in Albuquerque where I insulated 30 houses for free in the natural gas price spike at 2000 when their heating bills went from 100 to 500 and their Social Security was 400. And rather than do what utilities usually do, which is raise money to keep paying the bill, we just went in and wiped out the bill. I had an energy services contracting company that did that. And every house I left, here's this old woman destitute in bed, 90 years old, just crying that now she's going to have food instead of paying the gas bill every month. And it's got pretty close to that feeling I got of dropping a basket of fish in the matriarchal culture. But I think the real thing here and what we have to correct is here, if you do something out of the goodness of your heart, you're a chump.
That's true.
All right.
Right.
Only profit is respected, and that it's the opposite in the way we were designed to operate as the human being. And the real simple difference between matriarchal and patriarchal, who gets more wins? in matriarchal, who gives more wins.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
And you can get extreme. There's a word in the Palauan language, melangmes. And melangmes is the most stoic of warrior that you could possibly be, and how it expresses itself. We've been out in the canoes all day. Nothing to eat but raw fish. You just grab it and take a bite right out of it like corn on the cob. And that's all you eat. And when you come back to the village and you're dropping the baskets of fish, and some old woman goes, hey, I've got some tapioca, I got one yam here if you like it. Even though you're starving, you say, no, thank you, Akmadingus, I'm full. And that's taking something. So you do everything you can to give and never take. Now, if somebody died or there's a wedding, the warrior class is forced to eat first. But other than those events, never be seen eating. That would be taking, just giving, giving, giving. And so in that system, it really works. When you give, you feel really good.
Right.
Like here, the only way you can feel good is to take something from somebody. That you should feel bad about.
Well,
that.
when I say it, it's kind of like I've brought this up to a friend once. It's like we're in the survivor culture. You look at the show Survivor, and it's
start eating each other.
What is it? Outthink, outlast, out. Do you know what I'm talking about, Chris? They have like 3 sayings. It's I don't know. I've watched a couple times, but it's all about lying. I mean, from what I've seen, it's like okay, yeah, we're a team, but at the end, it's all about me,
and that's a winner,
and I'm the winner because I've basically screwed everybody else.
Because you were more predatorial,
right, and, and they, it's
well, it's the real difference. There's lots of ways to explain the matriarchal versus patriarchal. Another one is competitive versus cooperative. Do we all cooperate and share everything we have together every day, or is it competitive? And the real problem with predator capitalism is it's a competition, but there's a lot of people who aren't playing. And the people who aren't playing, it's like, I'm a boxer and I get to punch everybody I meet, even though they aren't boxers. That's capitalism today.
Right. Well, and it's funny, I mentioned that the book Ishmael by Daniel Quinn, and one of the things he did is he referred to indigenous tribes, like in Micronesia, as leavers, and, Western civilization is takers.
Right.
It's the same kind of concept. He's like, they were leavers. They left things for other people. They left a legacy. They left a way of being that was regenerative. It was renewable. I mean, it was going to be something that could continually go on and on the way they were living for thousands and thousands of years. And we're takers.
Right. Well, like in that culture, what's valuable here, what's valuable there, what would be the most valuable thing? Well, here it's knowing something that's going to result in some super patent and dominate a marketplace. Right. Over there, it's knowing what everybody's favorite fish is. That's true power and knowledge. Because when you get the fish and you know where it goes, it's her or his favorite fish, you take it right there. And that's power and knowledge. Wow. And here, wow, what a different way of looking at it.
Yeah, it is. And that's the thing, is that kind of living can just continue. It can just continue.
And back to hemp. Hemp, I think, can really, I'm worried, though, a little bit. I've already seen some fingers. There's some Wall Street companies
dipping their fingers into the pot a little.
Well, there's people already talking market share of the Colorado hemp industry. And
like it's a pie that they're divvying up.
Right. And nobody's even planted yet. And we're already under attack. It's just crazy. Medical Marijuana Inc. already has a division. It's a pump and dump Wall Street deal. They own a bunch of stuff. Dixie Elixirs is a subsidiary. And, the guy that's head over there said, I've got one goal, and that's to dump this at an incredible profit to big pharma or big tobacco or big alcohol. That's his goal in life, is to sell out to some really nasty Wall Street company. And one of their way down the tree kind of divisions is the one going around right now saying they're going to buy all the hemp. So we have to be careful about that. It's who owns it.
Right.
Really, if we're going to have a hemp processing company, wow, if it's owned by citizens of Colorado, that'd be a really good thing.
That would be amazing. I mean, you have that. I mean, you look at states like Alaska where they have huge oil production and they get money back from all the oil produced there. I would love to see something like that for Coloradans out here. If we're producing energy and all, and all these products, I mean, it would be wonderful it's a wonderful thought, at least, not that it's going to happen, but that it would be almost, not controlled, but at least endorsed enough by the state and maybe subsidized a little bit to get the industry going here in Colorado so that it can really boom.
Well, in Canada, they planted. Somebody was promising to buy it all at a really high rate, and they planted, they went from 2,000 acres to 25,000 acres, and then the big talk didn't come through.
Yeah.
And it all rotted in the fields and rotted in the barns, and a lot of farmers went down over it.
I think that's a great conversation to have after our next break. We have to go to break.
Okay.
But I definitely want to talk about that because that is a pitfall that we need to make sure that we avoid here in Colorado when it comes to hemp production.
I think it's if we get rid of the competition and try cooperation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll be right back with Bill Althouse from CANNATECH. Thanks for listening.
The law offices of Edson, Maton, and Matz provide criminal defense, medical marijuana defense, and advice about setting up and running medical marijuana centers, optional premises cultivation operations, and infused product manufacturing businesses throughout Colorado. With offices in Denver and Aspen, we can offer assistance throughout the entire state of Colorado. Give us a call at 303-831-8188. That's 303-831-8188. Or visit us online at warrenedson.com.
River Rock Wellness, located at 4935 York Street and on the corner of 6th and Calumet, right next to Lamar's Donuts at 990 West 6th Avenue, offers in-house, award-winning organic medical cannabis flowers, concentrates, tinctures, topicals, edibles, and raw superfoods for all patients. Prices range from $160 to $240 an ounce, with member and non-member benefits including caregiver, SSI, SSDI, vets, travelers, and sponsored programs. With brands you trust like Healthy Creations, Rare Dankness, Rock Butter, Priva, Token Daily, and more. Become a River Rock patient or renew with us today and receive a $100 ounce of choice. Offer good through April 20th, 2013. No more Huey Lewis after this, by the way. We can move away from Huey Lewis. That's Chris's personal joke because I said it was my first concert a couple of weeks ago that I ever went to. So I'm a little embarrassed by that. So we're here with Bill Althouse from CANNATECH. And when we left the break, we were talking about the pitfalls that we need to avoid here in Colorado that Canada fell into. And it was 98 that they started producing hemp. And just a little recap for our listeners. And they were told, grow. There's this huge demand.
Oh, they were told, here's your guarantee. We guarantee to take everything at this ridiculous price.
Yeah, and that did not happen.
Well, it was a promise from a bunch of guys trying to get rich off of farmers.
Exactly.
That's the danger. The farming's the hard work.
It is.
And I know this predator model prevails, but I think the guy who does the hard work should get the bulk of the profits. Mm-hmm. And I'm worried here in that, if Wall Street owns the seed, if some Monsanto type company controls the seed and some Wall Street company owns the factory you have to sell your crop to, and the farmer's caught in the middle, there's no way that's going to work out. There's just really no way.
So, I mean, it's a model that we're used to, though. So we obviously we're looking at a new kind of model to create it.
Not in agriculture. The thing is we should stop looking at this as a separate plant, and we go, okay, this is agriculture. Well, take wheat, for example, all right? Every wheat farmer in the state of Colorado belongs to Grainland Cooperative. Now, a cooperative doesn't make money. Its only goal is to increase the profitability and lower the overhead of its business members who are wheat farmers. So they all pull their wheat. It all goes into the silo during harvest when the prices are very, very low. And it's all stored. Now, the co-op works with all these people. It gives them credit. It pays them checks. It does funding to help them get through when they're not actually literally selling. Right. And then when the price of the wheat goes back up, then they sell the wheat. And so they end up making a lot more profit per acre per year by stepping up one level of vertical integration, rather than having to sell to the Wall Street-owned buyer at the price they dictate. And we saw some of that in Canada. They're pretty much told what price they're going to get
Right.
before they plant.
Mm-hmm.
The farmer doesn't have any say over what that number is going to be. But what if the farmer owned the fiber processing plant?
Well, yeah, that was
So
my
instead
question.
of, it's not worth baling and they leave it in the field to rot like they do in Canada because there's no fiber processing plant.
That still amazes me, by the way.
and
that in
it's-
15 years, there's no fiber processing plant.
No fiber processing.
Yeah.
And what if the farmer owned that? So now, instead of it being worthless, maybe finished product is worth $1,000 a ton, $2,000 a ton. And so if the farmer cooperative ownership, and this is really common, like if you, as a model, energy was my thing. So I looked at how cooperatives did, say, ethanol plants. It's not real smart in energy value chain, but it was really interesting in cooperative ownership model. Here, all these corn farmers got together and took all the grants and tax credits through the cooperative. The cooperative owned the ethanol plant. So now, instead of selling corn, they were selling ethanol plus taking all the tax credits. For the individual farmer, it was a doubling or tripling of their profits per acre.
Sure.
Because they didn't sell it as corn.
Right.
They sold it as ethanol.
Right.
That just like the guy in Germany doesn't sell hemp fiber, he sells BTUs. So maybe here in Colorado, the farmer shouldn't sell fiber. He should be selling T-shirts and bolts of cloth and stuff like that. And it's called value added.
Of course.
So
And I get, I understand the concept of the vertical integration is saving money because you're skipping out those middle guys. Okay, I'm going to buy it for you. Now I have to sell it to this guy for a profit. Now that he has to sell it. And when it finally gets to retail, that price is so inflated, it's ridiculous. Where if you're skipping a little bit of those steps, you're obviously cutting costs immensely. But when we're looking at refining plants for hemp, we're looking at what, $30 million, $25-30 million?
it could be, but again, all the value is really at the sweat end of the chain.
Right.
So what the guys who put together the ethanol plants is they're saying, hey, I'm willing to plant 5,000 acres of corn and care for it and harvest it and deliver it. And there were 20, 30 guys willing to do the same thing. So when they went to the bank, they were actually able to leverage that resource stream, that commodity, and use the projection of the commodity to raise the fund to build, operate, and own the ethanol plant.
That does make it seem a little bit more viable. I guess the big issue, and the one that we're dealing with hemp, which is still absolutely ridiculous to me, is it's under the Controlled Substances Act. So we already know in the medical marijuana industry here in Colorado and across the country in any legal state that they can't bank with any FDIC-insured bank, at least for a short time. It's funny. I was talking to a client, well, actually, no, not even a client, just a friend of ours in the industry, and they were saying, well, I have to figure out which company I can put my new bank account for the dispensary under because I have to change my banks every 4 months because they let me go for a little bit and then they shut me down and then I have to open up another one. And it's like, the feeling of having to be illegitimate to run a legitimate business is insane. And so when it comes to farmers, my understanding is from the couple of farmers I've talked to about this is like, look, man, I just want to grow.
They hate paperwork. Farmers
Of
are
course.
farmers. You got to go out and work hard all day, and sitting at the desk doesn't get that done.
Yeah, exactly. From dusk till dawn, they're coming back with their basket of fish, so to speak, and they don't want to have to do anything else after that. And they shouldn't have to. They've done all the hard work.
Right.
What sounds like needs to be proposed, maybe through Hemp Cleans, our friends at Hemp Cleans, is some way to create that coalition of farmers that they all work together on getting it. But they're not going to get a loan, not from a bank, at least not yet. Do you agree with me on that? I just don't see any FDIC insured bank wanting to do any loans for hemp until they take it away, separate it from.
They've built a lot of walls
Yeah.
against this plant over a very long time, and those walls have to be knocked down one by one. Getting the right to plant was maybe a small step towards real production, but the activism needs to change its direction. First, the activism was directed to government. Well, we still need activism, and now it's to make sure that the farmer makes a living planting hemp. We need to be just as aggressive in helping farmers be successful as we were in getting government to agree to let farmers plant.
Well, and there's a lot of steps to that too. Like we said, there's the refining plants that the farmers, it would be great. And I love the idea of the farmers controlling that source where they're taking the fibers, they're taking the oil, and they're cleaning the oil themselves, and they're refining it, and either for biodiesel, which I know is not incredibly viable anytime soon.
Well, there's other varieties of hemp that may work better than the one
and we don't know if they'll grow in Colorado yet.
We don't know yet.
Yeah.
Well, and that gets back to step one.
Right.
You know, my fear is the farmer gets between a Monsanto and a Archer Daniels Midland.
Yeah.
You know, that's dead. That's a dead end street. So I think the first thing is open sourcing the genetics. And to me, it's all one plant. You know, some people get all upset trying to convince everybody that hemp and recreational cannabis is different and medical is different, and they're all different. You know, it's all the same plant.
Well,
you know?
it is and it isn't, right? I mean, it's like, you know, I've heard some people, I use the comparison as, you know, a Chihuahua and a Great Dane are canines.
Right.
But they're different dogs.
Absolutely.
But they're both in the canine family. And I say the same thing about the hemp and marijuana. And really, a lot of people don't realize this. Marijuana is really a made-up name. And it was all called cannabis.
It's cannabis.
Or it was called hemp back in the day. You know, 200 years ago, it was hemp or it was medical hemp. But
the genetic thing, we need the whole pool. So I really don't like the 0.3% limitation on hemp, because that means we have to take, you know, 99% of the total gene pool of the plant and throw it out. And we're left with a very narrow selection of genetics that may have to come off on an approved list. Most of those varieties are patented and controlled. So we're being, you know, funneled down the chute again. I was just gonna say, funnel's a perfect way to look at it. We're already being geared right to a Monsanto model. Exactly. So what can we do to protect ourselves against a company? You know, there's a bill getting ready to go into the legislature here. Hemp Cleans is really working the aisle. Those guys, they're awesome. Yeah, they're really incredible. And you know, I looked at the bill, and CSU is scared, but really the first step to having a chance here is there's some brilliant people at Colorado State, and I mean brilliant. I mean, the National Seed Laboratory is there. Yeah. So we need to add hemp genetics to that open source pool. Now, they also do patented varieties and everything else. So some of these narrow patented varieties that we're going to need, they need to come out of that system. To be, first of all, that you know exactly that it is that variety and how to tell differences in varieties, and we need their lab right away. CSU needs to be first out of the blocks, really. Now, and I don't know how many of our listeners know this about when we mention companies like Monsanto, is that they're patenting seeds. And that was something that was not allowed until, 20 years ago, I think it was, by the Supreme Court, and they allowed you to patent organic products, which was something that was considered unheard of. There's still some restrictions as to not occur in nature. Right. A few other requirements. Right. But when you're talking about open source, now how can you eliminate the ability for a company to patent it? Well, they would have to plant variety. There's two ways to patent something in a plant variety protection, which is an unusual characteristic plant that you can collect from the wild or from breeding, but it has to be radically different than all the other plants of that group, of that phenotype, in order to be able to make that argument. But that's doable. The number two is a plant patent itself, and a plant patent has to not occur in nature at all. Right. And it has to be propagated asexually, not by seed. And that's what Monsanto's been doing. Yeah, well, they go way beyond that. GMO is a way to get to that. There's a lot of ways to get to a plant patent. I've done some experimentation in biotechnology and working with stem cells of cannabis plants, and you can breed cannabis in a petri dish through a process called somatic fusion, where it's like grafting. One time I had a plant with 20 varieties on one root ball. I just grafted, we had a plant, you had a plant count limit, and you wanted to keep all the moms, and you can't. So I had one plant with 20 different branches. Each one had a tag on it, and each branch was a different variety. How does that work? Oh, it's real. It's you just cut it and tie it on. Basically, there's some real quick, easy ways to make sure a graft takes, and it's real simple once you know how to do it. It's real easy, actually. So, that's a grafting, and every fruit tree is grafted. Got a different root balls, a different variety than the fruit that goes on it, and so grafting is not GMO. It's not anything scary. Friars have been doing it with apples forever.
Sure.
So I kind of took that down to the stem cell level. So I can take 2 cells from 2 different plants, dissolve the cell walls, and force them to graft to each other at the nuclear level. So now instead of 2 sets of chromosomes, it has 4 sets of chromosomes, a tetraploid. That would be patentable. So one of the ways to keep out of Monsanto would be to breed something to itself at that level. It's not GMO. It's not aneuploidy, which is where you take a gene out or put a gene in. In this technique, the chromosomes stay whole. Right. It's what God made.
And so what you do, I'm sorry, you can patent it yourself.
All those are patentable because they don't exist in nature.
Anybody,
well, that was the original idea when I came to Colorado, is that I wanted to protect all the genetics, and one way to do it is to go ahead and take the whole kit and caboodle and do somatic fusion, make it patentable, and then open source the whole thing is my plan. Anyone can have it, and let competition, if cooperation doesn't happen, let competition be about who's the better grower or processor, not who's keeping genetics for themselves.
Right. Wow, it's amazing. Yeah. We have to go on one more break.
Okay.
And then when we come back, we're going to shift gears. I got to talk about the campaign to regulate alcohol like marijuana. Before we go, though, I just got to say we could probably go about 4 hours right now, Bill, on all the knowledge base that you have.
We'll have to do lunch or something.
We're going to have to do lunch sometime because, I'm learning a lot, and I definitely want to learn more from you. It's a pretty amazing conversation. Thanks for listening to Hemp Connoisseur. We'll be back in just a moment to talk about Bill's campaign to regulate alcohol like marijuana. And, yes, I did say that in the correct order.
Are you a runner? Are you a runner who supports marijuana legalization? Run on Grass is a group of athletes actively seeking to change our marijuana laws. We speak the truth about cannabis, bringing the message through our feet to new ears. Check out runongrass.com to find out more about us, our events, and how to join up or how to sponsor a runner. If you're in the Denver area, please join us for runs or start a group in your area. Running not your thing? Any sport can do it. On grass. Runongrass.com. Let's face it, rules and regulations are complicated, especially in the field of medical marijuana. Let Medical Marijuana 101 help you get through the compliance process. We can also explain to you your employment requirements, your employees, and your business. But our work doesn't stop there. Our experience in cultivation ranges from the design of grow rooms to the diagnosis and resolution of grow problems. Visit us at www.medicalmarijuana101.com or call 303-388-7706. That's 303-388-7706.
I'm Gary Johnson, and you're listening to iCannabis Radio, and I want to say, talk it up, Colorado.
All right, we are back with Bill Althouse, we've been covering quite a bit of subjects in this short hour, and I feel like we needed to have like a 2-3 hour show today to kind of really fully cover it all. But the one I really want to talk about right now, and I think it'll be a good close to the show, is your Regulate Alcohol Like Marijuana campaign. And you sent this to me, I think about a week and a half ago, and I forwarded it out to all my staff and all my friends, and Westward did an article on it. I know you've been getting a lot of coverage on this.
Reason posted it. It's all over the country.
Did Reason post it?
Yeah.
Awesome. And it's great that Reason posted it because this is incredibly logical, and I love working from an argument of logic, and I think that's why we have been winning the Reefer Madness battle in the past 15 plus years now. And you started out as it's a letter to the governor. And actually, it's funny because I wrote a letter to the governor and my letter from the editor. This next issue is coming out next week.
I hand delivered him a copy, by the way.
Did you? Yeah, I haven't do that. We're gonna send him a magazine though. So it says, "Dear Governor Hickenlooper, your Amendment 64 task force has shown great courage in protecting our youth from harmful substances and bad parental role modeling. This willingness to protect citizens from the cells is a great opportunity to add safeguards from the most dangerous drug of all, alcohol." Totally agree with you on that. Alcohol is the leading cause of all violent crimes in Colorado. Alcohol is the major factor in 75% of domestic violence, in 50% of all traffic fatalities, 60% of rapes, 57% of murders, and 60% of assaults. 70% of all teens have had alcohol, and alcohol is the major factor in over 50% of all teen fatalities from suicide, murder, traffic, and drowning. When public safety is the issue, controlling alcohol is the answer. Constitutionally, marijuana must be regulated in a manner similar to alcohol. Instead of giving marijuana producers and users the equal rights of current alcohol users, we should regulate alcohol like we intend to regulate marijuana and save our children from the most dangerous drug of all, alcohol. And I love that. It's a great opening statement. It's perfect. It's to the point. I actually
can't be argued either.
And it can't be argued because you're using facts. And so then it goes on to say the campaign to regulate alcohol like marijuana recommends that rules and regulations be implemented into the Colorado liquor laws so that alcohol users and producers are treated the same as marijuana users and producers. And these new rules and regulations would create the following conditions. And there's quite a few conditions, so I'm going to kind of try to go through a couple of them because I want us to be able to talk about this. But the first one is great. A glass of wine with dinner or a beer after work on a hot day is proof of alcoholism. Let's just actually talk a little bit about that. So I know you're pulling this straight from the Amendment 64 Task Force regulations on marijuana. And I love that you put it in the reference of alcohol because, you know, Governor Hickenlooper made a fortune on alcohol. And I do find it a tad bit hypocritical.
Very.
So explain which regulation that kind of pointed to, because I know which one it is, but please explain to
Like, you're not having a problem with alcohol until you're falling down drunk all day, every day.
Right.
But if you took, in statistics, when they're tracking drugs and all that, if you took one hit of marijuana in the past year, you're a habitual user.
You're a habitual user.
You're an addict.
Right. So that's where the parallel came in there. And for the listeners, that's what it is these are all amazing parallels.
It's just the flip.
Just flipping the coin on alcohol, exactly. It says consuming, and this is a really important one actually, the second one, consuming one drink of alcohol on the weekend is grounds to be fired by any employer. Because right now, if I smoke a joint over the weekend and I'm working for an employer that doesn't like that and they drug test me, they can fire me.
It's a trace. A simple trace. You
Just
don't
a
have
trace.
to show that you were high or none of that. A trace. That's grounds.
So even though we're legalizing it here in Colorado and anybody over 21 can legally consume it, it doesn't mean that a company must keep you employed if you are consuming it.
They can have their way with you.
And they can have their way with you, exactly. So, and I think that's great. That kind of goes back to the whole predator society of corporatism, in which, okay, yeah, you have rights, you have First Amendment rights, you have all these rights.
Unless you exercise them.
Yeah, I mean, you can exercise them as a citizen of the United States, but you can't exercise them as an employer of certain companies. And that's interesting because it talks about the corporatism and the fact that, you know, corporate companies can take more control over you than the government can.
Right.
You know? It says if a child sees a parent consume alcohol, protective services may remove the child from the home.
Well, the debate during the task force hearings that I went to, it was just unbelievable. If a kid just sees it, that's child abuse. If they just see it.
But it's okay for me to drink a beer in front of a kid.
Oh, you can get drunk every night.
Oh, yeah.
That's
At a family
all good.
barbecue, you can
That's
get
all
loaded.
Good. That's all good.
That's okay.
Ever been to a Nuggets game? There you go.
Exactly. I mean, imagine the day when there's a guy walking down with peanuts, there's another guy walking down with beer, and there's another guy walking down with little spliffs for you. Because that's really, I mean, and people think of it as absurd, or a little vaporized pouch or something, but I mean, is it absurd when alcohol is something killing people and cannabis?
It's humorous, but it's really real for me. The statistics, and secondly, I quit drinking 37 years ago, and I've had to tolerate drunks. And I mean, I found them offensive, rude, irritating, and yet it's legal for them to be in my environment everywhere I go.
Oh, yeah. I've been bartender. We talked about this before we started the show. I've been a bartender for 20 years. You know, and I don't really drink at all because I've seen what it does.
Constant reinforcement.
Constant reinforcement. Exactly. I'm like, well, I don't want to be one of these assholes.
I quit drinking in a nightclub, 37 years ago, and it was one of the roughest joints in town. And so, I had to put down 3-4 people a night. 3-4 fights a night. It was just standard practice with alcohol.
Well, and I mean, we've talked about it. There's the MMJ meet and greet, and cops have been there before, and they're like, well, you get 500 people crammed in a room all getting high, you're not going to have an issue. No need for security. I mean, they'll have it there, but there's no need for it.
A classic is I went to Club 64 for Super Bowl. Now, I've been to Super Bowl parties before, and they're dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
The supporters of the two teams are at each other's throats, and as they get drunker and drunker, it gets more and more dangerous. At the Club 64 Super Bowl party, most everybody went home at halftime. It just got quiet.
All right.
After about an hour, it just got quiet, and people went home.
Well, and it is funny when you think about most of the stories, and I will say this, alcohol has been responsible for some crazy stories. It really has. You could say the pot smokers tend to be a little more boring as far as their stories
Well,
go.
you won't do anything outrageously stupid.
You won't. And that's the thing, is you're talking, and when I say the great stories, the underlying thing is immense stupidity.
Well, you know the last words of a drunk redneck, right?
What's that?
Hold my beer, watch this here.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I'm going to touch on a couple more points here because I think this is great. All publicly viewable consumption at sporting events, backyards. Oh, my iPad just decided to shut off for a second there.
Yeah, no liquor by the drink anywhere.
Yeah.
There's nowhere you can smoke a joint in the state.
No.
Except maybe in the back of my limo.
Except for in the back of your
Maybe
in the back of the limo.
Maybe that's
well,
legal.
in your home, in your own private home, you can. But
Well, not if a kid comes in.
not if a kid comes in. I can't go on my front porch.
If your drapes are open, that was a debate. I heard that discussed. If a kid's walking by and he's peeking through the fence, he's a neighbor kid and there's a crack in your fence, or he's riding his bicycle by your house,
See,
and your drapes are open and he can see you.
and this is why I love that what you've done here, because it's really showing the absurdity of this. It's like, look, if you're going to tell us that this is something legal to do, then allow us to do it. I mean, yes, you got to be responsible. Everybody has to be responsible.
It's a constitutional issue in a manner similar to alcohol. It's really, like take regulation. Now we're finding out how that none of the medical has been regulated at all. It was all just a smoke and mirrors kind of deal. But they regulate 20,000 liquor licenses with $1 million budget. They couldn't regulate 300 dispensaries with a multi-million-dollar budget. And that shows you how unregulated alcohol is.
It does. Oh, no. And trust me, after working in bars in other cities and states around the country and in Denver as well, it is not regulated very well. It's not. I mean, there are some bars I've worked at that I was like, when's the last time the Liquor Commission came in to check you out? Oh, no. Not for a while. I haven't seen them ever.
Event permits. They do 2,000 private event permits a year, which allows you to serve liquor by the drink on city, county property and public. You don't have to hide. You don't have to put up containment. I mean, you can pretty much pour liquor. One of the things that was really interesting that qualifies for these special is political fundraisers. It's the core of a lot of political fundraisers.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and it's funny because I think you and I know when you have somebody who's been consuming alcohol, it makes it easier to spend money, And so I understand why they want to lube them up a little bit before. I mean, but cannabis might do the same thing. It makes people a little bit more open to things and maybe open to a dialogue and going, okay, well, I understand why. But at the same point, cannabis users generally want to hear more story from you about why they should give you money. I mean,
right.
And alcohol is, yeah, sure, here you go, it's just such a good point. I just want to see that day, Bill, where a public official who used to joke about alcohol, and I talked when we were at Hemp Lobby Day. I'm not going to name who it was, but I was talking to a state representative. Loved this person. They were great, and they made a joke about it, because we had the cannabis energy drink was there, and they were tasting it out, and they're like, oh, and I was like, yeah. And he said, oh, it probably tastes really good with alcohol, and I was like, actually, it tastes really good with vodka. And all of a sudden, they were like, we got a bottle of vodka in our office.
Exactly.
And so every time I hear that, I always go, insert cannabis. Well, why couldn't they have said that? Well, we actually have 1/8 of cannabis in our office.
Politicians are notorious, and go back to how Prohibition passed. A lot of people don't know that women got the right to vote on a single-issue campaign. It was the temperance. It used to be called the Home Protection League because back then women didn't have the right to say no, and most wives were beaten, and raped on a daily basis. Vertically integrated breweries had take over in the inner cities. That's why this vertical integration idea is so crazy. Vertically integrated breweries had taken over, and they were literally grabbing guys and dragging them off the street into bars, giving them salt something on something, and credit and everything else. And it had really made home dangerous for women. They had no rights. And the suffrage movement was really tiny when it was taken over by the temperance movement. And they really had one issue. We're going to outlaw alcohol because we're tired of being beaten and raped. I mean, that's what was happening across the country.
Sure.
And men saw it coming, who controlled the legislature. So prohibition was passed by men out of fear for women doing prohibition right. They wanted to leave the back door open. So, you know, all the black market, crazy gangsterism, all that was created as a back door to rigged prohibition before women got the right to vote.
And it was a means for politicians to be able to raise money. I mean, you got money from you know, the gangsters or the bootleggers to be able to do that. Yeah, I mean, it was a great means of tax-free money.
I was really hoping women might step up on this one, but unfortunately I met smart Colorado people, very instructive. They have this high-powered lobbyist, Sandra, and Sandra's hurting all these women. You know, we saw one the other day, the 10-year-old kid who was getting text messages. Well, he gets a new phone, and a cannabis patient was the previous owner of the number, so he's getting some texts. Well, now the kid was drug into the legislature. Now it turns out she's the marketing agent for a big pharmaceutical company.
How convenient that is.
This is a threat to her.
It's always
and she's
amazing.
using the children. And, you know, the lobbyist gal, to show you, I don't know what they're trying to teach kids, but, you know, I ask her this question. I go, well, you know, all preventable teen fatalities are related to alcohol. So what's your position on alcohol? And she got vicious. And I mean absolutely vicious. I couldn't believe this woman who's this super lobbyist, right? Well, they're crowding in the sign-up sheet. You got to sign up to speak to the committee. And I couldn't get at the counter because it's all the smart Colorado people packing the joint there ahead of me. And then she goes, turns around after being evil, after being, you know, Darth Vader. She turns around and goes, did you want to sign up? Here. And she hands me a blank sheet. And it's crowded at the table, so I fill it out, and I go and I hand it back. And just by luck, about 10 minutes later, I stopped back to look, and my sheet was gone. So basically, she handed me a sheet, I filled it out, and then she threw it away so that I wouldn't have a shot to speak. So what are they teaching our kids, you know? Drinking and cheating, I don't know. But I don't know what the goal is, you know. I really made her angry later by asking her if she was funded by big alcohol. Because that would really be the whole deal. They're doing the fear. They don't want it to be about alcohol. So here is a chance to deflect the fear from the killer, what's really killing the kids in the state of Colorado, and deflect it to some theoretical fear rather than an actual justifiable fear.
I do think that this is, I mean, it's going to still affect us in Colorado, this thought process for a while. Even though we've gone so far and it's legalized, it's still going to affect us, and it's affecting the hemp industry as well. It affects the hemp industry in Canada. I couldn't believe when we were at the farming symposium when they said that they weren't allowed to have hemp fields a certain distance from schools. And I was just like, you can't smoke hemp.
You know, they'd submitted in this legislature, a bill was submitted to allow kids to drink if they're with their parents. So they're trying to give alcohol to kids. The number one killer.
I'm sorry. I'm. It's hard not to laugh at that.
It is.
Greg, why is that even?
How could that even? I know.
Why are you even wasting time with that? I mean, who cares, really? I mean,
well, I remember the argument when I was a kid. My mom, alcohol's legal.
No.
So now we can't talk about the dangers because it's legal.
As a child, you know, I grew up in an Italian family, and I think right around the age of like 10 or 11, I was allowed to have, you know, when we did the little, you know, the Italian style wine. It was no stem glasses at the time, and I would get some with some water. So it would be very diluted, and I would try it, and I would have a couple of sips, and I didn't really like it. I was a kid. Kids don't really like that stuff, really, normally. But I did have it once in a while when I wanted to feel adult, and if it was like a big function. And I think because of that, I will say, my attitude towards alcohol was very different. I don't have a history of alcoholism in my family, and nobody was ever a really big drinker in my family, that I know of. Well, there's always one. Okay, there is always one. But it was never a big deal to me. So I do get that thought process of, a little sip here and there. And Europe doesn't have as many issues in alcohol as we do in the United States because their drinking age is usually 18, or pretty much everywhere. And they're much more lax about it. But unless you're talking about Ireland, I guess. But so I get the idea, but I also don't get why it's even a point to do it in legislature. You know what? Parents are going to do that in their home if they want to with their kids, and nobody's going to bother them about it. But I used to get people coming to bars, and they would order a beer for their kid. I'm like, no, I'm not serving your kid. I'm like, you're in a public place. And, oh, yeah, but they're with me. No, they can have a soda. We're not serving alcohol to minors,
Well, it was kind of crazy. The senator dropped the bill allowing people under 21 to have a drink if the parent. He told the story. Why did you submit the bill? Well, my daughter came back from school. It was her birthday. She's 20. We wanted her to have a drink. Now here's a parent going, we wanted our kid to drink and we weren't allowed. Well, there's a reason. And now when you flip this the other way around, it's just so absurd that a simple gauge is death toll. Mm-hmm. I mean, that first paragraph
it's huge.
It's here's the statistics. This is a killer. It's the number one killer. Yeah. And I don't know. I've never seen marijuana kill anybody.
No.
I've known a lot of people who died drunk.
Oh yeah. I mean, we have our baseball field is Coors Field.
Right.
Now, I get that Coors is a huge company and it stimulates the economy here in Colorado, and I'm not knocking the company at all. But when we're saying it's okay to name a baseball stadium after a beer company, and we're saying that you can't even smoke a joint in your house with the drapes open and a kid happens to walk by in the privacy of your own home, and that could be considered you're committing a crime.
Absolutely.
It's just insane.
Well, and after a lifetime in alternative energy, I can't solarize a plant.
Right.
I think we need a new term. I was thinking it the other day. I think everything indoors should be called photosynthetic. Just so people understand, it should be like, a labeling issue. This is photosynthetic. This plant did not achieve the optimum light spectrum.
Of course, you're talking about nuances that the Americans are not used to dealing with. We deal with broad strokes and Jersey Shore. Come on now. So I think everyone's getting. I absolutely love what you're doing with this campaign. So is there a next step for the campaign?
Well, there's some real issues that helped inspire this. I mean, you read on down, and there's some things about, I know some stuff about horticulture and agronomy and horticultural engineering. And based under this proposal, I can go be an employee of an existing medical marijuana facility, but they're allowed to take all my intellectual property. There's no way that I could participate in the value I've created by years and years and years of research. I would have to give that away to a dispensary and be a fireable employee at any given time.
Right.
And I can't sue under contract law for my value. And there's a whole other component that's not even considered, and that's the whole no high group. I mean, there's the get high group, and then there's the no high. I was one of the first CBD producers in the country and got to see what it did firsthand for some really chronically ill people, and it's spectacular. We just finished sequencing the cannabis plant. It's the most genetically diverse organism on the face of the planet. There's more new genes in this plant than any other source. There's 200 chemicals that have not been explored. There's another 40 cannabinoids we haven't even looked at. And, just from an economic development standpoint, what does that mean to the state of Colorado? If it's a legal plant like any other plant, why can't we do biotechnology, nutraceuticals, pharmaceuticals, all the things that aren't about getting high, as we're seeing in hemp? But that's a limited gene pool.
Right.
When you look at, even recreational or medical, the genetics and what's going on there chemically is just spectacular.
Oh, yeah.
And all of that is barred. I mean, to do my gene work, I would have to go and be an employee of an existing dispensary. And that's kind of crazy. I wanted to bring up one more thing that I haven't brought up, and that is, this is really illogical. That we're not looking at alcohol the same way we look. It's bad logic. And there's another one that's really bad logic. And I know, a lot of people in the industry are going to hate to hear this one, but they just spent 10 years trying to convince everyone that medical marijuana was not about getting high.
Mm-hmm.
So now that we have the right to get high, they want to give a monopoly to people who just spent 10 years arguing that they don't get people high. Now, the only people with any experience with getting high usually had the balls to go grow some pot illegally. Mm-hmm. They might have a record or a possession charge or got caught in high school and that's on their record. They're barred from the industry. So I just think it's kind of weird. The people who have absolutely zero experience in get high varieties of cannabis were given a monopoly.
But we know that's not exactly true, though.
Well, you mean they were lying?
Well, I think what they were, obviously it was the means to it. And I think, I will say this, my experience, because doing what I do with a magazine, I get to meet a lot of dispensary owners and talk with them and visit with them all often. And I will absolutely agree with you that there was a definite portion of the industry that was just about getting people high, but under the guise of medical.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, there's people who are willing to take the hit.
Oh, yeah.
And the black market, they're heroes.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, really. I mean, these are the people that had all the great strains were created by these guys. They were pioneers in an industry. And why would you take all the pioneers in an industry and outlaw them at its birth?
No, and I think that's a great point. I think that a lot of these guys were here, and then one of my experiences is that there's a lot of those pioneers that started this industry kind of in the Wild West days,
right
before 1284. And then when 1284 came to be, they were like, this isn't the kind of business I'm used to, so I don't like having to do all of these. I don't like having to dot all my I's and cross all my T's. All I want to do is grow good product. And I think that was, and 1284 was set up to be a deterrent for those guys, or girls, I should say. But, and I totally get what you're saying. There are other centers out there that are saying, no, I'm staying medical, whether we have this recreational license or not, and they're very, very serious about it. But obviously, these guys are all in the business of, they are business people, and.
Well, I buy my food at the farmer's market, and that's where I want to buy my bud.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I want it full sun.
Right.
I want it full sun.
Right.
I want it organic, and I want a guy that I trust to make my salad be the guy who grows my bud.
But we are going to have a difficulty if we did allow the full sun like you're talking about, because now there's going to have to be some kind of limitations. Okay, if I'm growing a hemp field over here, then this guy can't grow a cannabis field within so many miles of my hemp field. Or he'll
be whacked, yeah.
Yeah. And so
by the pollen.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's a great, we talk about that all the time, is that common lie that the DEA says, oh, they can hide it in a field of hemp. No, they can't. They can't. But that's going to create an issue if you were to allow that. And I know there are that I know of, there's 2 legal outdoor grows in Colorado. Just 2.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's a shame. There should be a bunch.
There should be. But at the same point, I know of one of them. I haven't been to one of them, but I've been to one of them, and it's an impressive little farm that they have, and they have an indoor greenhouse as well, and then they have their outdoor field, and obviously they only really harvest once a year from the outdoor, just because of our weather here. But they're in a really designated farm area, so they're going to have issues if anybody in that area wants to grow hemp.
Absolutely.
And so, but is there going to be protection for him? To say, well, I've already been here. I'm grandfathered in. You can't grow hemp within 10 miles of my farm.
Be like a GMO contaminating his field.
Yeah, exactly. So it kind of creates it opens up a little bit of a can of worms if we do start allowing more outdoor grows for the marijuana side.
Every farmer's market in the state has craft beer and, boutique wines.
Yes.
Every farmer's market in the state. So, gosh, shouldn't every farmer's market have the guy who grows the one bud that he's been growing for 30 years? And that's, I know people have been growing for 40. Mm-hmm. Actually, that was one of when I first got into solar, my very first customers, I mean, this is back in 1976. Who walks in and drops in 76 $10,000 cash wanting a solar electric pump?
Right.
You know, I mean, it was pretty obvious what they were doing with that pump.
Right.
So, you know, some of those guys are the best ever. Sure. I mean, there's some great growers in Colorado, but, you know, there's some old-time guys up in Humboldt and around who really, you know, their terpene profile, the flavor, taste, bouquet, aroma, if you're into that sort of thing, is really hard to compare with high-volume indoor.
Right. And I think one of the things, and I think it's a good point to go back when you're saying when you have these people that have been doing this for this long and all this experience, and then you're not allowing them to be in business.
Exactly.
I mean, if they had a felony, they couldn't own a dispensary. They couldn't have any of this.
Yeah, well, I mean, if it's legal, then what...
Shouldn't that felony be gone?
Right.
Exactly.
Well, and Rob Corey's pushing this. He's calling it, we need to release the POWs. That there's
I agree.
prisoners of the drug war, and they need to be released.
I agree. And it would be great to see that.
Be able to vote again.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah, be able to vote, be able to open up a business in the expertise that you've had all these years that, you got arrested for. But let's be honest. I mean, how many bootleggers are now, have the lineage of being bootleggers and are now legitimate alcohol producers? So.
You know, I called the governor's energy person, and I went, hey, I can take 5% of the state's total electric baseload and take it 100% renewable right now at no cost. And then, it gets quiet at the other end of the phone. You're kidding, right? I go, no, 5% of the state's total electric use can be cut right now, go 100% solar at no cost. He goes, how the hell would you do that? Let them grow in the sun.
He's right. You're right.
At 5%.
If you let them grow in this, because it is right now, and a lot of people don't realize that 5% of the energy in Colorado is used to grow cannabis.
I walked into my first big industrial grows in Colorado a while back, and all these years of energy engineering, and I walked in, and every one of them I found $10,000 a month laying on the floor in bad engineering. Just laying there, just looking at it and go, really? You did crazy things. Like every grow I've ever been in, the lights are turned the wrong direction. Half the lights hitting the floor. Simple things like that. The air conditioning systems, they're dumping heat into the space they're cooling that could have been blown out of the building.
Sure.
It really simple changes that on the average grower are worth $10,000 to $15,000 a month.
Well, and then there's LED lights, which I hear mixed bag on the LED
Spectrum
lights.
issue.
Spectrum issue, I know. And I've talked to some people that are doing some pretty good work on research on the spectrum issue.
The best spectrum, right?
What? No, I don't.
Natural sunshine.
Well, of course.
Like, for example, I'll tell everybody a secret out there. There's a guy in California when the prices crashed because of dispensaries opening up everywhere. It didn't go as far as it did up here in Colorado, but there was a huge price drop, kind of except for one guy. And he managed to maintain his prices. And his secret was he was a June bud guy. Now, you can't use glazing. It can't be a greenhouse. There can't be glass. But if you look at the UVA-UVB index for the month of June, it's the highest month of the year. And it turns out that full spectrum, and in June, the UVA-UVB is really high. And I tell you, you take your favorite of growing any other way, full-blown outdoor harvest in fall, indoor, anybody, and you take that exact same plant, and you use light dep, and you bud it in June in full sun, no comparison to any other way you could have grown that plant. So, one of the things about eliminating the possibility for small scale and boutique, you've pretty much eliminated that as an opportunity.
Well, I didn't realize that we're about 20 minutes over on our time, Bill.
Did we go dead?
No, we're internet, so hey, for those of you who got an extra 15 minutes, enjoy. It's been a great conversation with you, Bill.
Pleasure.
We're
Thank
definitely going to have you back on because you're a wealth of information, and it just kind of pours right out of you, man. So is there a place that people can check out Campaign to Regulate Alcohol Like Marijuana?
It's posted everywhere. There is email. It's regulate alcohol equal marijuana if someone wanted to reach me.
Regulate alcohol equal marijuana
at gmail.com.
At gmail.com. Excellent.
And then there's the cooperative at info at CANNATECH.coop, COOP.
Okay, and what we'll do is Chris will get all this stuff down, and when he streams this for everybody to watch the recording, he'll put that up for you guys. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Bill. I appreciate everything you're doing, man. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Hemp Connoisseur Radio. It was a long one today, so I hope you guys enjoyed the extra time. And we'll see you all next week. Don't forget to check out all the other great shows on iCannabis Radio. We have what's that? In the Lab with Jennifer Murray of Can Labs. That's our science hour. She's awesome, by the way, one of the coolest chicks in the industry. Then we also have John Doe Radio. Every day from 11 to 1. And then we have Sexpot Radio on Tuesdays. And then we have Georgia Edson's Hour on Mondays at 6? 7 to 8. God, I got to have that memorized. So definitely please support all of our different radio shows. You get a little bit of a different flavor from everybody, and they're all fun and informative. Thanks for listening to Hemp Connoisseur Radio on iCannabisRadio.com. And until next time, peace, love, and hempiness.